morning and welcome back to our Newman Lumen series. My name is Allison Pelkes and I serve as the Multi-Faith Coordinator for Religious and Spiritual Life at Elon. It is my pleasure to put together this Newman Lumen series. This year, we've heard many stories about hope and how we find our means to it, as our theme is Bridging to Hope. We are in our final stretch, and I have one more invitation for y'all to hear from a speaker at Elon before we continue to our various places that we call home. So thank you for following along. This morning, we hear from Marcus Elliot. Marcus is the director of the Odyssey program and is in his 8th year at Elon University. A veteran practitioner with over 18 years of diversified experiences in higher education, he has served in a multitude of areas, including alumni engagement, diversity and multicultural affairs, and intercollegiate athletics. While at Elon, he has played a significant role in guiding students during their journey by providing mentorship, sharing constructive feedback, and celebrating their achievements along the way. As the Odyssey program increases its enrollment by securing additional scholarships for Elon students, he looks forward to continuing his pursuit in making a difference in the lives of young people. So without further ado, here's Marcus Elliot.
Thanks, Allison, for the introduction, to be able to take part in this dynamic series. It's a privilege and an honor, so I appreciate that. When I think about the prompt for this semester's Newman Lumen, I think about hope being a seed that can only grow with consistent and steady amounts of nurture, optimism, and patience. It's a gift that's been placed in each and every one of us. So we should take that, to heart. But many of us really take it for granted. It's during times of crisis and despair that it can be extremely challenging to showcase signs of optimism, whether it be in our own thoughts and mannerisms or through various interactions with others. Yet, there's a group of those who confidently believe in the ability of handling situations of adversity, which can sometimes mask itself as arrogance by seemingly calling upon the gift of hope almost at demand when needed. The audacity of this behavior hinges upon the notion that this gift comes to us as if it's already pre-assembled, ready for use in emergency situations like a fire extinguisher hanging on the wall. Hope doesn't work like that. We have to be good stewards of hope each and every day of our lives, even in times of prosperity and happiness. Cultivating the gift of hope throughout the swinging pendulum of life provides us with the practice of responsibility and ownership that's needed to effectively respond at the right time. One of my favorite sayings is this: if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. So how do we stay ready? That answer lies in the result of our own experiences with hardship and adversity in the past. You hear most people say, well, everyone has a story. And yeah, that's true. Even though Winston Churchill's quote, "If you're going through hell, keep going," sounds simple, the idea of moving forward despite its challenge can be daunting. Obviously, the manner in which we get through those tough times vary greatly. Those who are caught off guard when the storm approaches find themselves utilizing more of a reactionary response, typically in scramble mode, anxiously waiting for the storm to pass through. Soon after it clears, they might wonder, well, how did I make it through? However, as time passes, methods of survival become tangibly more accessible, providing us with anecdotal evidence for us to use on how to endure those tough times. Here is where we equip ourselves with the necessary tools for us to prepare for the next challenge when it arrives, which is a helpful foundation for us to draw upon in the future. From my vantage point, the gift of hope is rooted in the practice of using past experiences as a catalyst to move forward. So about 15 years ago, I was in a situation where I was starting to feel a lot of, pain, like physical pain in my joint areas. and specifically in my shoulders, my knee areas, and also in certain spots in my back. Yeah, at the time I'm in my, mid to late 20s, and I'm thinking, yeah, I'm invincible. I can just ignore that. It'll just go by, from time to time. It'll come back, but it'll subside. So I ignored it for about a year. And it got to a point where, I was in a situation where I just couldn't ignore it anymore. And got to the point where it was excruciating pain, to the point where it would wake me up in the middle of the night. It would come out of nowhere if I'm walking, or if I'm driving anywhere in my vehicle. I'd have to pull over to the side because it was just that unbearable for me. And during this time, I had just started my first full-time job, post-master's degree. And I was, away from a lot of my foundation, family, friends. I was living on in the West, in the state of Colorado, and I was by myself. Not technically, but yeah, I really was by myself. And I said, I need to go find out what's going on. And I'd only been at that position for maybe a month and a half, 2 months, and I had not found a primary care doctor yet. And did some research, talked to some colleagues, was able to find a doctor just to go in and get looked at. And went in, did some preliminary tests, told them what was going on. And I'll never forget, it was a week before Christmas. And I'd already had plans on flying home. My home is in Alabama. And got to a situation where they took blood work, everything, went home to my apartment. And I was getting ready to hunker down because we had a big snowstorm that was on the way. And we were going to get, multiple inches of snow that evening. So I went to the grocery store, they gave me some pain medication, everything was fine. Get home, get a phone call from the doctor, basically telling me that, the results came back as far as blood work, and she saw some things that were a little concerning. And basically, she had asked me had I been out of the country, and I told her no. She asked me had I been exposed to any, situations that may have, spiked my, immune system to fight off an infection, and I told her no. Got to a position where she finally just told me that, my white blood cell count was abnormally high, and the normal white blood cell count would be between, 5 to 10,000 white blood cells if I'm fighting an infection. She told me that my white blood cell count was in excess of 150,000. So at that moment, she wanted me to get in and do an emergency biopsy, just to find out what's going on. At that moment, I was, met with a lot of shock, a lot of grief, and a lot of, disbelief in what, the doctor was telling me. And initially, didn't want to go in to the emergency room because she wanted me to get checked into the hospital immediately. I kind of lagged back, but one of my colleagues basically came to my apartment and pulled me out to say, hey, you got to go get checked out. So packed my things, went into the hospital. That was a Tuesday. And the next day I was, undergoing a bone marrow biopsy. And then things kind of led from, one step to the next, to the point where ended up having to be in a hospital for that entire week because they were trying to figure out what's going on with my white blood cell count and going on in the bone marrow. And basically, I was in a holding pattern because didn't know what was going on. They did the biopsy. They had to send it off to a lab in California, but they couldn't get it to the lab because the snowstorm shut down the airport, which is almost never happens in Denver, but it happened. And in that holding pattern, I had to sit with a lot of uncertainty, had to sit with a lot of questions in my brain. Here I'm, 28, 29 years old, full of life. But at that moment, there was tons and tons of unanswered questions that I had to kind of grapple with. And it's easy to sit in those situations where you're in a place where things can kind of crowd you to the point where you just want to go inside and not be bothered, or just to run and hide. But that's not how we should respond to certain situations like that. It's easy to do the alternative, is to just throw in the white towel and just surrender. But we're born to fight. We have every ability within each and every one of us to not sit with results that may not be ideal. We have the actual courageous ability to push through despite our fears. That's the whole definition of being courageous. And it was at that moment where I said, this is a very dire situation, but I'm built for it. Primarily because of situations I had to use in the past, where I was basically met with some uncertainty, and I had to utilize that as, like I said before, as an opportunity to have those anecdotal pieces that allowed me to get through that situation before, or multiple situations before, to help me in this moment. So everything is designed perfectly. We may not agree with the design, but it's a method to the madness. And once we become more aware of that purpose, as far as why we are in those positions in the first place, the easier it is for us, and I say that lightly, the easier it is for us to kind of be able to frame our brains and our mindset and our outlook to have a more positive spin on things that really look bleak. So I was able to get out of the hospital Christmas Eve, flew home, finally got the results, and ended up being diagnosed with chronic myeloid leukemia, CML. And been living with that, for the last 14 years. But that's a blessing in and of itself, to say I've been living with that. The outlook obviously wasn't great initially, but I had to reshape my mind. It's powerful here, which basically permeates through the rest of your body. And if you allow this to disintegrate, or to take control of the rest of your body in the wrong way, you're asking for you're just asking for a not so great result. So I'm in remission, been in remission for quite some time, but it's just a situation where I had to basically utilize hope as an action, and not sit on my hands and just act like it's just going to magically appear. I had practice of this particular skill set, of the gift of hope, in the past, and I was able to utilize that in that moment to help me move forward. Hope isn't something that should be seen as elusive or impossible. Um, it's an active component of our lives that should be cultivated, preserved, and celebrated in the face of the enemy. And the enemy's job is to, kill, steal, and destroy all aspects of our faith and optimism. We should never yield our power to forces designed to extinguish the light each of us brings to this world. There's two choices when we're faced with hardship: either be positive or be quiet. Simple as that. At times we talk ourselves out of our own breakthrough by speaking negativity into the situation. There's so much power in the tongue, and it's careless for us to orchestrate our own demise. My challenge is for us to find ways to lift one another up, regardless of the current pandemic, the social ills of, racial tension and injustice in this country, and also the deepening divide in our nation as well. We owe it to our descendants who will examine our response in the future, and also our ancestors on whose shoulders we all stand upon. If we know better, then why can't we do better? Thank you.